Did Jimmy Kimmel just risk his entire career with one comment, or was he simply caught in the middle of Hollywood politics? Tonight, we unravel the story of how one of late night's biggest names found himself suspended, silenced, and fighting back in a way nobody saw coming. Jimmy Kimmel's journey to this controversy didn't start with one careless remark. To understand how this moment became such a flashpoint, we need to go back to his rise as a late-night host. His reputation for mixing comedy with political edge, and the moments when humor crossed into heated debate. When Kimmel first launched his late-night career, audiences knew him for his playful, sometimes outrageous humor. But over time, he became more than just a comedian. He evolved into a voice, sometimes a divisive one, commenting on politics, culture, and America's most sensitive issues. His monologues weren't just jokes, they became viral clips shared by millions, dissected on social media, and debated in newsrooms. But that same willingness to push boundaries is what led to his most recent trouble. It began with a segment where Kimmel referenced the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Many viewers thought the tone was flippant, dismissive, even cruel. Social media erupted. Within hours, hashtags calling for his firing spread like wildfire. Some said he was mocking tragedy. Others argued he was simply making a political point, not a personal attack. The debate became so fierce that ABC executives stepped in, suspending Kimmel. For the network, it may have seemed like the safest choice, but for fans and critics, it opened a much bigger conversation. Was this suspension about respect for the dead, or was it about silencing political commentary? When Kimmel returned to the stage, he didn't stay silent. He addressed the controversy directly in his monologue. He said he never intended to make light of anyone's death. His aim, he explained, was to critique the culture around free speech and political hypocrisy. But then he went further, criticizing not just the online mob, but also political pressure on networks and even the FCC's involvement in regulating content. It wasn't just an apology, it was a challenge. Kimmel's speech tapped into something much larger than himself: the tension between comedy, politics, and the limits of free expression. For decades, comedians have been at the forefront of cultural debate. From Lenny Bruce, who was arrested for obscenity, to George Carlin, whose famous 7 dirty words bit went all the way to the Supreme Court, comedy has often been the battlefield where free speech is tested. Kimmel's situation felt like the latest chapter in that history. And yet, unlike those earlier comedians, Kimmel operates in an era where every word is captured, clipped, and shared in seconds. One joke can become a career-defining controversy. The stakes are higher, the backlash is faster. The consequences, sometimes, are harsher. But what really makes this story complex is the collision of forces behind the scenes. Network executives who fear advertiser backlash. Political groups who seize on moments like these to push their agendas. Audiences split between loyalty and outrage. Kimmel stood at the center of all of it. As the suspension played out, insiders described tension at ABC. Was suspending Kimmel a matter of protecting the network's reputation, or bowing to external pressure? Some reports suggest executives were caught between political lobbying, FCC scrutiny, and the ever-present fear of boycotts. For Kimmel, though, the bigger issue seemed clear: freedom to speak, even if it offends. And this wasn't the first time he faced criticism. Over the years, he sparred with politicians, celebrities, and even fellow comedians. Some praised his honesty, others accused him of partisanship. But through it all, he held on to one belief: that comedy is supposed to push buttons. So when he returned from suspension, his words carried weight. He wasn't just defending himself, he was defending the role of comedians in society. His critics saw arrogance, his supporters saw courage. The fallout continues to ripple. Social media remains divided. Some call for his permanent removal, while others rally behind him, warning that silencing comedians sets a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, Kimmel keeps hosting, but with a sharper edge, perhaps even more determined to prove his point. To fully grasp the stakes of this controversy, consider the broader context. In Hollywood, careers have ended overnight because of a single statement. Roseanne Barr, for example, lost her hit show over a single tweet. Kevin Hart stepped down from hosting the Oscars after old jokes resurfaced. Yet, on the other hand, comedians like Dave Chappelle have faced intense backlash only to emerge stronger, their ticket sales booming. their names cemented as cultural icons. So which path will Jimmy Kimmel's story follow? That's the million-dollar question hanging over late-night television right now. Because while networks fear controversy, audiences are strangely drawn to it. A scandal can hurt careers, but it can also fuel relevance. And in an era where being forgotten is more dangerous than being hated, controversy sometimes becomes the currency of survival. But this isn't just about Kimmel. It's about the ecosystem he exists in. Late-night shows are no longer the cozy talk and laugh format of the past. They've become political battlegrounds, platforms for social commentary, and sometimes lightning rods for outrage. Every joke is a gamble, every statement a test, and hosts like Kimmel are caught in a balancing act between entertaining, informing, and provoking. The big question is, what role should comedy play in society? Should comedians be the truth-tellers who say what others are afraid to? Or should they stay in the safe zone of laughter, steering clear of sensitive topics? History tells us comedy has always been dangerous. From Richard Pryor shining a light on race in America, to Jon Stewart calling out hypocrisy in politics, comedians have often pushed boundaries others were too cautious to touch. Kimmel, whether intentionally or not, now finds himself in that same tradition, his suspension forcing the culture to ask hard questions. And then there's the network angle. ABC's decision to suspend him wasn't made in a vacuum. Behind closed doors, there are advertisers worried about boycotts, executives worried about ratings, and boardrooms worried about political pressure. To some, ABC acted out of responsibility. To others, it was corporate censorship disguised as accountability. The truth is, in modern television, public outrage often dictates business decisions. For Jimmy Kimmel, this creates a paradox. The very thing that makes him relevant, his willingness to speak out, also makes him a liability. Yet, in choosing to return with even sharper commentary, he signaled that he won't play it safe. That choice could either define his downfall or solidify his legacy. And maybe that's the real story here. It's not whether Jimmy Kimmel survives this controversy. It's whether this moment marks a turning point for comedy itself. Are we entering an era where comedians self-censor out of fear? Or are we entering an era where comedians fight harder than ever to hold the line on free speech? Because this isn't just Jimmy Kimmel's story. It's about where comedy, politics, and media collide. It's about how far networks will go to protect themselves. It's about how audiences interpret humor in an age of outrage. And it's about whether free speech still means freedom, even when the words sting. As the dust settles, one truth remains. Jimmy Kimmel has always been more than just a comedian. Love him or hate him, he has a gift for igniting conversation. And in a world where silence often feels safer, maybe that's why his voice, controversial, flawed, but unfiltered, matters more than ever. And so, the question we leave with tonight isn't just about Jimmy Kimmel. It's about us, about the culture we're building, the lines we're drawing, and whether we're willing to live with the messiness of free expression, or whether we prefer the quiet comfort of safe, unchallenging entertainment. Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. The Jimmy Kimmel controversy will be remembered not just as a late-night headline, but as a cultural moment. One that reminds us of the power of words, the fragility of careers, and the ongoing battle between outrage and expression. Thank you for staying with us through this deep dive into Hollywood's latest storm. If you want more celebrity gist, drama, and behind-the-scenes stories just like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is Nick Nyla, bringing you the stories others are too scared to tell. Subscribe, stay tuned, and we'll be back with more of the biggest names and the biggest scandals in Hollywood. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and never stop questioning the stories behind the stars.